Does Doctor Sharon's favourite book reveal the plot for Season 2? Which footballer appeared on a reality TV show like Jamie Tartt? Which character from the pilot reappears in this episode? Keep watching to find out. Welcome to Square Eyes, a channel where we recap, review and take a sideways look at your favourite TV shows. This video will be taking a look at the second episode of Season 2 of Ted Lasso, called Lavender. Apple TV summarises this episode by saying, Ted is surprised by the reappearance of a familiar face. Roy tries out a new gig, which tells you a little about the episode, but not much. My recap will tell you everything that happened. Let's jump straight in. The episode starts with Jamie Tartt getting voted off Lust Island, the reality TV show that he abandoned Man City to go compete on. Then he appears on daytime TV, and during his interview he says he hopes to return to his club, until they play a clip from Man City's director of football, making it clear that they won't be accepting Jamie back at the club. The news leaves Jamie shocked and not knowing where to turn. In the dressing room, Nate discovers that Will, the kitman that replaced him since his promotion to coach, has started to use lavender fabric softener on the towels and is furious. It seems unreasonably harsh, and Beard, in his own way, looks to try and deflect Nate's anger. Then we see Roy dropping Keely off outside the stadium. She tries to encourage him to come inside to say hello to his former teammates, but he has no interest in this at all. Ted notices him in the car park and tries to say hello, but he zooms off before they can talk. Then Doctor Sharon arrives on her bike, which is a surprise to Ted until Keely tells him that she's been employed by Higgins for the rest of the season. Ted tries not to look shocked or annoyed by this news, but is clearly a bit of both. Ted finds Higgins and confronts him about hiring Doctor Sharon without consulting him first. They then have a strange discussion where Ted criticises Higgins but then immediately criticises himself straight after. Higgins is baffled by Ted's reaction, but the real problem is Ted's discomfort around psychotherapists, rather than Higgins' decision to bring Doctor Sharon in. Then we see Jamie Tartt in a meeting with his agent, who tells him that nobody wants him at the moment. His bad behaviour has caught up with him and no team is willing to take him on. The only work they can get for him is another reality TV show where he has to take drugs every night for 3 weeks. Jamie is now staring into the abyss. Back at Richmond, Ted tries to win over Doctor Sharon with his homemade shortbread and natural enthusiasm, but she rejects both, asking him to knock when he enters her office and saying she doesn't eat sugar. Ted tries to get Doctor Sharon to talk about her favourite book, but she shuts down the conversation and draws attention to how he's trying to make a connection with her. She gives him back his shortbread biscuits and asks if she can observe training, which Ted agrees to. It's an interesting scene as Ted bursts into the room trying to dominate the conversation, but Doctor Sharon wouldn't allow this to happen and basically sent him away with his tail between his legs. While she's not openly hostile to Ted, it's clear she's not willing to let their relationship develop on his terms. Roy Kent gets home and interrupts Keely enjoying some alone time in the bedroom. She was watching a video on her mobile while in bed, and Roy asks if he can see what video it was. After some negotiation, Keely agrees, and we find out it was Roy's retirement video that she was using during her private moment. The video shows Roy breaking down in tears as he announces retirement from playing football. Keely likes this because it shows him being passionate and vulnerable, which is something she's not seen in him since he stopped playing football. She says that he's been lost lately, and he should take the punditry job that he's been offered to get back into the game. She mentions how Jamie Tartt has also been lost since he's been out of the game, but at least he's trying to get back in. Jamie tracks Ted down to the Crown and Anchor and asks him if he'll take him back at AFC Richmond, after Keely recommended he speak to his old coach. Ted asks Jamie why he left Man City to do the reality TV show, and he says he did it to upset his dad. Then Jamie asks for his place back on the team, but Ted tells him that he doesn't think it'll work out. Unfortunately for Ted, the lads in the pub get a picture of him and Jamie sharing a drink, which make it onto social media, so the players are passing the pictures around the dressing room the next morning, and talk of Jamie coming back is causing concern among the players. Sam takes the news particularly badly, answering Ted back on the training pitch and storming off to the dressing room, which is all observed by Dr. Sharon. Ted finds Sam and they talk it over. He's concerned about Jamie coming back to the team. Ted reassures him that he told Jamie that he couldn't come back, and then sends Sam to run laps around the training pitch for swearing at him. Roy Kent makes his debut as a football pundit, and despite some nerves before going on, he does a good job. He swears too much, but his no-nonsense style of talking connects with the fans and he's popular with them. Ted gathers the Diamond Dogs in his office to ask them about bringing Jamie Tartt back in again. He's reconsidering his decision after Sam talked about the backing he received from his parents. Jamie doesn't have a supportive father, which has led Ted to think he deserves another chance. Nate and Beard vote against bringing him back, but Higgins would like to see another striker in the team. This leaves the final decision with Ted. Roy returns from his day of working as a football pundit and is grateful for Keely for her encouragement to get him back involved in the world of football again. So much so that he thanks her in an intimate way that she enjoys while rewatching the retirement press conference again. Ted catches Dr. Sharon as she's leaving for the day and asks for her feedback from her observations of the club. She says that there's a wonderful atmosphere around the club and everyone is thoughtful. Ted thinks this means that there might not be any problems for her to solve in the club, but she points out that the team is on an 8-game drawing streak, so clearly something isn't working. She also suggests that he might have a few issues that need working on. Then she opens up to Ted a little bit by telling him her favourite book, before riding off into the night. The episode ends with Jamie Tartt arriving on the training pitch all of a sudden. The rest of the players are clearly unhappy about this new arrival, and his welcome is about as warm as the snowy weather. I thought this was a pretty good episode of Ted Lasso. After a fairly slow start with the opening episode, things feel to be moving now, and there's a bit more momentum with the story. I really like the way that Ted and Dr. Sharon Fieldstone struggle to connect with each other. It's like they operate at different frequencies, with Ted's folksy charm not working on her, and Sharon's calm and distant approach putting Ted on edge. I initially didn't like Dr. Sharon's character, and thought she was out to get Ted, but when I watched the episode a second time, I realised that she's actually just establishing boundaries and not letting Ted dictate what happens in their relationship. She had every right to tell him not to barge into her office, and it's reasonable not to want to get drawn into in-depth personal conversations with someone you've only just met. Ted is obviously a sitcom character, operating in a sitcom universe, but it feels like Dr. Sharon is someone more connected to the real world than the rest of the characters in the show. Therefore, Ted's charm doesn't work on her, and he struggles to know what to do when she isn't won over by him, though there was a sign, at the very end of the episode, that she's starting to like him when she told her about her favourite book, which I'll talk more about in the bits and pieces section. It was good to see Roy Kent get his sense of purpose back when he took on his job as a TV pundit, even if he couldn't control his foul mouth. I found it interesting that Keeley found herself more attracted to Roy during his emotional retirement speech because he was passionate and vulnerable. Clearly her pushing him to take this job in TV was to help him out of his slump and to get him back to be involved in the game, where his passion really lies. I didn't particularly like how Ted handled Jamie Tartt's return. I can understand his reasons for bringing him back in. Firstly, he's a good player that's available for free. Secondly, he's a player Ted has taken on the role as a father figure to, and sees him as a project that has not yet been completed. But I don't think it was right to let him just trot out on the training pitch without telling the other players about it. I guess this was just so there'd be a big dramatic moment at the end of the episode, but you could see the hurt on the other players' faces. When Ted was talking to Sam after he stormed off the training pitch, Sam made it clear that he was upset because he thought Ted was going to bring Jamie back into the club without talking to the players first. Ted reassured him Jamie wasn't coming back, then the next day brought Jamie back, without talking to the players first. I think that was pretty poor man management from Ted, which is usually his strongest skill. My favourite line in this episode came from Jamie Tartt's agent when he says, "Jamie, you know you're like a son to me. Now you're like a dead son, which means I love you even more." It struck me as a loving but also quite brutal way of an agent to give his client the brush off. In Rebecca's office, Ted pretends to shake hands with Higgins' Plant and calls it Robert. Then Higgins holds up a page and calls it Jimmy. They're both referring to Jimmy Page and Robert Plant, who are both members of the band Led Zeppelin, the prog rock band from the 70s. When Ted is trying to make conversation with Dr. Sharon, he mentions his favourite book is The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand. I'm guessing this is a joke, as The Fountainhead is a book that is generally liked by terrible people that are deep into right-wing politics. It's a novel that central idea suggests that only an individual person's vision can create genuine art, and outside interference from committees and other groups ruin things. I'm summarising, so I've no doubt lost a lot of nuance, but my point is that her philosophy is the opposite of Ted's, so I think the writers might have thrown this reference in as a joke. Sharon mentions at the end of the episode that her favourite book is The Prince of Tides, which is very revealing and could provide a major hint towards Dr. Sharon's role within the story for Season 2. Prince of Tides is about a psychologist who helps a retired sportsman cope with a traumatic childhood and a sister who has recently tried to seriously harm herself. In the book, the psychologist's icy demeanour is broken down by the charismatic ex-sports star, and they work together to help each other solve their problems. So that novel could provide the blueprint for Ted and Dr. Sharon's journey for this season. Roy Kent mentions that there was a goal disallowed in the under-9s football tournament because it was scored with a header. This rule is usually applied in children's football in the UK due to brain development, as Roy Kent mentions. I wondered if this was a callback to Season 1, when Roy Kent did the school visit with Ted and had Phoebe and her classmates practicing headers in the playground, which I thought was a bit odd at the time, but maybe Roy Kent didn't know that it was something you shouldn't do with children at that point. After Jamie Tartt's appearance on Lost Island, I did a quick Google search, and it seems like it's fairly common for footballers to appear on similar talent shows. Love Island in the UK has had quite a lot of footballers from smaller football teams over the years. In the summer of 2022, a player from Halifax Town signed a new contract with the club on the 9th of June and then announced he was going to Love Island on the 20th of July, with the club giving a tight-lipped statement saying it was important for the player. Like Jamie Tartt, the player found himself not wanted by his club when he left the talent show in August. Ted Lasso's moustache really does have a Twitter account. It has 4,208 followers, and my Square Eyes YT account is one of them. The other pundits that Roy was working with on the Soccer Saturday programme were Chris Kamara and George Catrick. Chris Kamara is a real-life former footballer and was, until recently, a football pundit too. Sadly, he has developed a condition called speech apraxia, which means he can't do it anymore. The other pundit, George Catrick, is a fictional character who managed AFC Richmond until Ted Lasso took over. Rebecca sacked him in her office in the opening scene of the pilot episode and mocked his tiny shorts. Now we know that Dr. Sharon is going to be at the club for the whole season. We can expect to see more of her and Ted on the screen together. While they both seem to be wary of each other at the moment, I suspect we'll see the two of them open up more and more as the season progresses. Could this lead to Ted opening up about his panic attacks that he suffered in the Season 1 and the issues around his divorce? Roy seemed to enjoy being back involved in football again, and through him we can see a bit more of the wider world around football, so I like the idea of him being a pundit. I can't see him being on the air for very long though if he keeps on swearing like that, so it may not be a long-term career move for him. And Jamie Tartt's return to AFC Richmond will be interesting. He's clearly got a lot of work to do to win over his teammates, but I get the feeling from this episode that he's slightly more humble this season after his experience on Lust Island. Maybe he'll just be a bit more likeable than the egotistical monster we saw in Season 1. As for the other storylines, we saw Rebecca filling out an online dating profile, suggesting her love life might feature in the upcoming episodes, and Nate's harsh treatment of Will led to the title of this episode and has been a recurring feature of both episodes so far. Maybe the promotion to a coaching role has given him a bit of an ego, and the mild-mannered Kitman from Season 1 is now changing into something a bit different in this season. We'll have to see. Thank you for watching my recap and review of Season 2, Episode 2 of Ted Lasso. I'll be uploading videos for all of Season 2 of Ted Lasso before Season 3 airs, so please subscribe to make sure you don't miss any of them. Goodbye.